guys, Julian here, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make We Are the Brave style techno. As usual, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets, all of that stuff in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available. And yeah, let's get started. So we're at 127 BPM. First sound I've got here is the kick, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty standard techno kick. Essentially what it is I started with this sample. So just like, a pretty punchy, hard-hitting, sort of basic kick. And then the first thing we have here is this rumble rack. So this is what's doing the rumble that you hear. You can see I've got two chains here. A dry chain, and then the chain with the rumble. And the way the rumble is being made is using delay. So there are a few ways that you can make rumble kicks. You can either use delay or reverb. With delay, you tend to get a more kind of very kind of like driving sound like this, versus with reverb you tend to get a bit of like a softer, kind of more smooth sound. But in this case, I wanted the more driving, kind of like intense sound like this. So that's what we got. We got this delay doing 16th notes, and then I have that going into a distortion. So the distortion is where you get the rumble, because you can hear if I turn off the distortion. And then when I turn it on, you can hear it just blows the sound out. Like we're getting this really intense high end, but you can also hear it brings out this really rumbly low end. And then after that, we have a low pass filter. And then that just solos the low end there. So yeah, and then I also after that have a compressor side chaining it to the dry kick so it doesn't get in the way. And then also so it doesn't get in the way, I have an EQ8 here cutting at 100 Hertz, which is typically where the punch in the actual punch of the kick is. And then boosting the low end to make it so the low end kind of comes out a little bit more. And yeah, that is it for the rumble. It's a very simple technique, but it's all about just kind of getting that delay or the reverb and then distorting it and just playing around with the different settings with delay and distortion. After that, I have an EQ8 just kind of cutting a little bit at 254 Hertz, cutting out some low mid-range. This helps to get rid of some mud, and it's also boosting the low end. The thing is, this EQ isn't so much like you can't so much hear this one in the final kick in terms of just oh, it sounds like they cut out the low mid-range and boosted the low end. But what this is doing is just kind of altering the sound going into the drum bus. Drum bus, as you know, is a saturator, and the way saturation and distortion works is it's the frequency and the signal that you put into it. It's how hard and how loud that is going to determine how much distortion there is. So if we turn down certain frequency bands and then turn up certain ones, we can make it hit a little bit harder in the low end while making that low mid-range kind of taking a bit of emphasis off of it, if it makes any sense. After that, I've got a bit of drum bus here, so without that. So you can hear this is what really takes the kick and pulls it out and just makes it hit really, really hard. This also works really well for gluing together the rumble with the kick. A lot of times when people send me tracks, or just when I hear tracks that aren't super professional sounding, a lot of times this is the issue, is that their kick, if it's not glued together, if you don't try to do something to process the rumble and the punch of the kick together, it's just not going to really hit properly, because they're not going to feel even. Without this, you can hear the rumble is really loud, and then the kick is really not able to contend with that. But with it, it puts everything in an even place. And then yeah, I've got the drive up a bit, I've got the crunch up a bit, and then I've also got the transients up. So this is what really makes the kick hit. And then I also have this boom up a little. Here's without that. And then with it, you can hear it's really subtle, but it just gives it that last little bit of bass to really make this rumble properly. And then the last thing we have on here is an EQ8, and this is just boosting the low end a bit. Again, just trying to bring out that low end, and then cutting the low mid-range just to take out some of that mud. Here's without this. And then with it, so you can hear this just kind of fits it into the mix properly. And yeah, that is it for the kick. The next sound we have here is the 303, which sounds like this. So it's just playing one note. You can see it's just playing F. It just plays this one F every now and then. With a track like this, you really don't want to have too much stuff going on, because the stabs, that's already taking up so much space. But if you just have a little 303 like this, and you can hear it's kind of hitting on one of the notes where the stabs are already hitting. It can fit into the mix and add a lot. So that's what this is doing. It's just kind of like an extra sort of auxiliary layer. For the sound on this one, it's made using operator. I'm not actually using any FM synthesis. You can see we just have a saw wave going into a bandpass filter. Really simple. The main thing with this one is the settings on the bandpass filter. So the key here is, first of all, you want a lot of resonance, obviously, for a 303 sound. But the key here is with the envelope. You can see we don't have a lot of envelope. It's only at 10%. And then the decay is like pretty long. Like for a short stabby bass like this, usually you'd do something like this. But here, we have this longer decay. And so it makes it so you can really hear the filter, basically. Like, the problem that I find a lot of times is if you put the envelope up too high, you're just getting a lot of, like, craziness. And if you give it too fast of a decay, you don't really get the full impact of that filter sweep when you hear it in the full mix with everything around it. So having the longer decay and just less envelope works really well. The other thing with less envelope is we're automating the filter frequency around. This is, a simple technique to kind of give it some movement. Like you can hear. So it's different every time. If you had a really high envelope, then when you go up high like that, it would just be like too much like bandpass. Like it would sound more like a high pass filter. But yeah, after that, I've got a bit of distortion here, so without this. And then with it, so you can hear without it, it's really not quite the same sound. Like it doesn't really have that like big crunchy 303 sound. And this is very important for getting that. After that, I have a bit of echo, just doing quarter notes, so this is just kind of like dun, 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 kind of making it ring out like that. Then we have a bit of drum bus, just to fatten the sound up and really tie it all together. And then the last thing I have on there is an EQ8, just cutting out the low end. And that is it for the 303. The next thing we got going on here are these old school sort of ravey stabs, which sound like this. So with these, I was really trying to show you like how to get the big full stab sound. If you just take like, say we just take like this stab and like I'll just put it in here and we'll copy the same MIDI to it. You can hear it sounds cool. But you hear how this is so much more full and like professional sounding and just deeper. I wanted to show you how to do that. So here are the notes for this. This pattern can be a little bit tricky to write because you have to make sure like with these stabs, they're all playing a chord. So if you have kind of like notes that aren't going to fit, it's going to really, really stand out. What you have to do is just kind of like walk up the scale like this. Like you can see I just did. Just really careful to make notes that all fit together. And then what I did was I just put these down an octave like that. But yeah, and then for the sound with this one, you can see what we've got going on here is I have two stabs inside of an instrument rack. So I have this one, kind of like some more high end, and then this one which gives it some nice mid-range and more body to the sound. And then on the high end one, you can see I've high passed it. And I've also got a bit of chorus on it. Since this one is in the high end, I wanted to spread it out a little bit. You don't want it to be super wide. It's still techno. It still needs to work in mono, but having this be spread out a little bit does help. And even when you're hearing this in mono, like in a club, you'll still hear a bit of that chorus. So yeah, that's the key here is layering. Like just try to get sounds that complement each other. Like this one has a lot of bright sharpness to it. This is a bit softer, but just has that body. If you can get sounds that complement each other like that, you can make a really, really full sound. So then on the instrument rack, like on both of those, I have a bit of reverb, just kind of gives it some space. Makes it sound even bigger as well. If I turn this off and then turn it on, you can hear it's not so much to where it's going to get in the way of the sound, but it does make it feel a little bit bigger by giving it some space. Then we have this drum bus. This is gluing these together as well as making them fatter. Here's without it. And then with it, so you can hear how essential this is. Like, this is just such a good way to fatten your sounds up. Definitely, drum bus is not just for drums, but you can use it on anything. After that, I have a bit of EQ8, cutting out the low end, and kind of just cleaning it up, making sure there's no stuff. Because a lot of times with these older stabs, there can be some, like, weird low end stuff going on. So you definitely got to make sure to cut that out. And then the last thing we have on there is a compressor, just side chaining it a little bit to the kick. And what I'm doing here is I'm side chaining it to the pre-effects kick, because basically what that means is like the kick, like literally just this. Because you can listen, if we side chain it to this with the full rumble, it would be kind of weird. Like it would just duck it out of the way the whole time. I'll show you. See how that's just like constantly playing? If I put this on pre-effects here, we get that pump from it without having to take over the whole sound. This isn't a whole lot. You may not even think this is sidechain when you first hear it. This is less for the effect and more for just like kind of mixing the track and making sure that everything fits together well. This way it's not going to get in the way of the kick. But yeah, after that, I've got some percussion. The first one here is the shaker, which sounds like this. So this is just a shaker sample. You can see I've got it going like... kind of just like a little bit of a different pattern. A lot of times in techno tracks, I will do, and a lot of other people will do, just this, like just straight 16th notes. But if you do it like this, it makes it a little bit more interesting. Kind of getting some space between the notes too, because this is, to be honest, just as intense and just as much energy as just going the whole way through. But it kind of gives some nuance to it. It makes it a little bit more interesting this way. And then like I said, this is just a little shaker sound. Pretty simple stuff. You just want to find one like this, which has a lot of nice body to it in the mid-range and in the high end. After that, I have this hi-hat, which sounds like this. So this is your standard sort of hi-hat you hear on the upbeats. The key with this one is when I was referencing this against tracks from We Are the Brave and from Alan Fitzpatrick, it's like this very kind of like full one. Like if you listen, this has a lot of body to it in the mid-range, but it also has some nice high-end, and it also rings out really well. It's like you don't want to just grab one that's like, you want one that has a bit of body to it, this like this, and kind of rings out a little bit. And after that we have these two rim shots which sound like this. You can hear them in the whole mix. So these are just this one. Just like this little rim shot sample. And I've got it going through a bit of echo, as you can hear, and then it's also got some drum bus on it. Fatten it up. And then we have this one, which is just playing this one note here and there. And then that one's just got a little bit of drum bus on it. So these are just adding a bit of percussion, Tracks like this can get boring if you just have the hi-hats. But adding something like this adds a lot more to the rhythm of the track and helps add sort of like some ear candy. Like these are these extra little layers that you need to really bring it to life. And these can oftentimes separate an okay track from a really great track. So and then I've got all that percussion in a group together. So here is with none of the group processing. I'll show you how important it is to process your percussion all as a group. Here's without it. And then with it, so you can see why you need to do this. So the first thing we've got here is a bit of reverb. This just gives everything a bit of space. You can hear that one it just kind of helps with the atmosphere in the track. And this is also a good way to tie these together. A lot of times people say, like, how do you get percussion sounds that sound like they're all sort of from the same place and from the same world? This is how you do it, is by putting them all in the same space with some reverb. Because everything is getting that exact same length and time of reverb. So it's like your brain subconsciously just tends to associate them all as being in one place. After that, we have this multiband fattening rack. So what this is multiband processing. If you don't know what multiband processing is, it's essentially taking a sound and splitting it into different parts of the frequency spectrum. So like in this case, we've got the high end, the mid-range, and the low end. And then you can process them separately. And what this allows you to do is just do more detail work and get kind of better sounds, honestly, just through being able to really specify where you're working. So what I've got here is, like I said, I've got the high end and the mid-range, and then the low end. And the reason why I did this is basically this. If I put a drum bus on here, like how I would normally do, and start turning it up, you can hear, like, we can get a pretty fat sound. Right, like, those are some pretty fat hi-hats, definitely as fat as it is with this rack. But what happens there is you can hear, there's like kind of like a that happens in the mid-range. And what that is it's the high end and the mid-range being distorted together, and it's just kind of like messy. Like, it's not really, I don't know, to me it doesn't sound very professional. It sounds fat, but it sounds kind of rough around the edges. So what this allows us to do is process the high end and the mid range separately. And like I said, get that same fatness, but now you can hear how much more clear it is, and we don't get that underneath it. So the way I did this is just using EQ3. You know, you're able to split it into 3 separate bands. So I've got the high end, and then this is being saturated. Then I got the mid range, and I've got a drum bus on there because I really like the drum bus. And I even wanted to go harder than I was going before when you saw I had the one on all of these, but I couldn't because it would mess everything up. So with this, I've got it on the hard setting. We got the transients up. And yeah, you can hear it's just hitting really hard in the mid-range now. And then for the low end, there's really not much in there, so kind of just left that one on its own. But yeah, this is a really great way to fatten up your hi-hats, because with hi-hats and percussion, it's like, you know, you really need to be able to get this specified and really, like, clean sound like this. So this is how you do that. So yeah, after that, I just have a bit of saturation. This helps to just glue everything together. Sometimes when you do this, it can kind of make it very clear that each thing is being separated and processed separately, which I don't think that's so much of an issue here, but I always like to just put a little bit of saturation. Just kind of glue everything together, and this isn't causing that same kind of distortion that we were hearing, so it works. And then the last thing I have on here is just an EQ8, cutting out the low end and then boosting the high end a little bit, just to kind of bring it out in that hi-hat and in the shaker and stuff. And that is it for the percussion. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project file and samples and MIDI and presets and all of that stuff in this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And one last thing, I have a new EP dropping in a few days on Obscura Music. It's called Eon Flux. I'm going to put the link to pre-order it and check it out before it's out in the description. Make sure to go check that out. And yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.